Hi everyone, my name is Miss Allison. I'm one of the librarians here at the Downers Grove Public Library. Today I have 3 different sensory activities that you can make at home for your babies and your toddlers. Everything we're going to do you can make with ingredients that you probably already have in your house or are going to be pretty easy to get. And everything is made from edible ingredients, so it's all stuff that if baby accidentally pokes in their mouth, it's not going to be the end of the world. So the very first thing I'm going to show you is how to make flower paint. I love using flower paint. It's a little bit thicker than a normal paint. I have some right here. You can kind of see it's a little bit thicker. It's just made out of 3 ingredients. And so those 3 ingredients are standard all-purpose flour, water, and food coloring. And I just have regular liquid food coloring here too, but you can use gel food coloring or fancier food coloring. That's all up to you. So the biggest thing to remember when making flower paint is that it's about 1 part flour to 2 parts water. So whatever type of measurement you want to use, whether you make a big batch or a little batch, it's up to you. So I'm using tablespoons. So I'm going to take 1 tablespoon of flour, put it in my little cup, and about 2 tablespoons of water. I'm actually going to back off on the water at first because you can always add more water if it's too thick. And then I'm going to stir. And you're basically just stirring until all of the flour and water is incorporated. And you get a little bit of a paste. This is actually a little bit less thick. Nope, there it goes. Than I like. I'm even going to add like a pinch more flour in. You can keep kind of experimenting. It's not an exact science here. And then after you get it to the thickness that you like, you can add some food coloring. I just have some red. Add about 2 or 3 drops for this amount. Obviously more. You're doing more. Then you get that nice reddish pinkish food coloring color. So what I like about flower paint, again, like I mentioned, is that it is thicker, which means that it works really well with a variety of different type of brushes or pretend brushes. So you can take your regular paintbrush and dip it into it and use it on a piece of paper. I have an example when I used the blue earlier. Paint it on it, kind of almost has like a watercolor type of texture. If you make it thicker, it's going to be a little bit thicker. But what's really great about flower paint is you don't have to use paintbrushes. You could use other sorts of kitchen utensils. You could go on a nature walk before you decide to paint and pick up things like pine cones or leaves and dip that into the flower paint and put it on the paper. You could also use Matchbox cars or other little toys to make stamps on the paper. It's really just a great way to use some household ingredients to make a paint that if your baby gets in their mouth, it is not the end of the world. Alternatively, yogurt is a great paint. All you have to do with yogurt is add food coloring, so we did not demonstrate that here. Hi. Okay, so for our second activity, I'm going to show you guys how to make some homemade Play-Doh. So there's lots of different recipes for this out there on the internet, and so I kind of played around with a few, and this is what I like the most. So for your first thing you want to do is add your dry ingredients to your pot. You just need a pot and a heat source. You're going to want to put your heat source on about medium. So you have 1 cup of flour. You have about 1/3 to 1/4 of a cup of salt, 1/4 to 1/3 a cup of salt. You can do less salt, but it makes the dough a little bit stickier, and it's not going to last as long because your salt's really your preservation agent. And then 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar. Now, if you don't have cream of tartar, you can replace it with lemon juice. So it's about 3 tablespoons of lemon juice equals 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar. If you do that, you do want to back off on your water, which is your next ingredient. So for this recipe, it's a cup of water. If you're using lemon juice instead, you maybe want to use about 3/4 a cup of water and a tablespoon of oil, any kind of oil. So once you get all that in together, you want to start mixing. And it takes a little while to get everything fully incorporated. Basically, you just want to mix until most of your dry stuff is mixed in. And you can tell the dough looks pretty wet. Now at this point, I recommend putting in your food coloring. It's up to you whether or not you can also do it afterwards, which I will mention when we get to that point. So I'm again just using regular liquid food coloring. I'm going to put in about 5 or 6 drops. If you want to mix them, you can do that too. And you start stirring together. Use gel food coloring, like I mentioned with paint. It's going to be a little bit more vibrant of a color. Really, whatever you have is going to be what works. And then you're just going to want to stir. So as the dough starts to heat up, it's going to start to get lumpy, and that's okay. That's what we're going for. You can tell right now the dough looks very wet, and that is what we are not going for. So what you're doing is you're cooking and you're stirring it until it is not wet anymore, and it starts to look more like Play-Doh, actually. You just want to keep stirring, because you don't want your dough to burn. Really get your arm a good workout. If it starts to get really chunky, it's all a good sign. Scrape the bottom as you are doing it. Try to get that good baked on dough. Getting a lot closer. So once your dough is kind of all lumps and it's starting to not look so wet, you kind of want to start pushing it into a ball and onto your spoon. So as you can tell, it's pretty lumpy. It's not as wet as it was. And this is when you want to take it off the heat and get it into an alternative container. Now, I think a Ziploc bag works best, because you'll be able to seal it and still touch it through the bag. You're going to open your bag, get as much of your dough onto your spoon as you can. Keep scooping it out, put it in your bag. There you go. Again, you can use any kind of spoon. I've also found that like silicone spatulas work really nice. You want to zip up your bag, and then you want to start kneading it with your hands. It is going to be a little bit hot, so if it's too hot to touch, you can wait till it cools down. Now, if you did not add food coloring previously, this is the time to add the food coloring after it's in your bag. So you could split it into 2 bags and do like 2 different colors out of the same batch. I find it easiest just to add it there, because you really have to knead the dough a lot to get the food coloring mixed in. So just keep mixing it until it's pretty well incorporated. There we go. And then once it cools down, you're going to be able to handle it. I'm going to show you finished product, some red dough that I made earlier. Again, just like regular Play-Doh, you can roll it out, you can cut it, you can press it into designs, keep it in an airtight container, and it'll last you for several weeks. Okay, so for our last one is probably our most simple. It's making edible sand that you can use just like real sand. So this edible sand right here, you can see it, it is coarse, kind of like sand. I'm going to pour it into this bin. That's kind of ideally where you'd want to play with it with your child. And it's made out of simply 2 ingredients: a sleeve of saltines and some cornstarch. So my blender is not the best blender in the world, so I'm going to pre-crush my saltines before I put them into the blender. If you have a better food processor than the library does, then you will be able to probably put them in mostly whole. So, like saltines because they're self-contained. You can do it with Ritz crackers too, or really any type of cracker. I just like the texture of the saltines the most. I feel like it gives the most sandy sort of feeling. Again, you want to kind of pre-crush them up a little bit before you get them into your blender, or again, might not be necessary. All right. Put the lid on and you're gonna do the saltines by themselves first. And you don't want it to get too fine because you still do want a little bit of rough in there. And then you can add some cornstarch. Just kind of hold it together better. About a tablespoon or two, depending on, your own preference afterwards. So then go ahead and do it again. And then you can sort of shake it all together. It becomes your nice little fine powder with a couple of coarser pieces in between. So if I was going to fill up this whole bin, of course I would do all 4 sleeves. Then you start filling it up in there, and then you can give your child a shovel or a spoon or some measuring cups. They can keep breaking up in their hands, and again, if it ends up in their mouth, it's just crackers and cornstarch. Okay, that's all we have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it. I know they're all very simple, but hopefully they're all stuff you can do without having to leave the house. And if you need more ideas, talk to the library. We always have new stuff coming out. Thanks. Bye.